jobs that its proponents claim it will, nor will rejecting it save the global environment the way some environmentalists claim it will, because the tar sands will be exploited regardless of whether the pipeline is built. So I really think he's been of two minds of this, and it's hard to predict where he will go. It's true that some of the senators, Democratic senators who would have been most vulnerable if he vetoed it, will no longer be in the Senate. So that may give him a little more political leverage. But I'll tell you, I think Gloria said earlier, she talked about how upbeat he was, how buoyant he was. I was there as press secretary for 3 end-of-the-year press conferences, and this one was quite different. Just in the end of the year, what was going on at the end of the year. We had no fiscal crisis. We had no international crisis, at least not yet, knock on wood. And he does clearly feel in the wake of the midterm election that he's been able to demonstrate that he's relevant and that he can execute and get things done. And he feels good about it.
Let's get some reaction from a different perspective. Cliff May is joining us. He's the president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. On North Korea specifically, Cliff, what did you think of what he said?
Well, I was glad that he said that a dictator shouldn't be imposing censorship on the United States or on the free world. But I don't think it's Sony's battle to fight primarily. I think it's our battle. And I'm buoyed by the fact that he said that there will be a response. Less so that he assured North Korea that it would be proportionate and that it would not be beyond that, because there needs to be some deterrence. Cyber warfare is a very dangerous thing. In this case, it was used to shut down a movie. Then there were terrorist threats. Cyber warfare could shut down our entire society. I don't think we're where we should be on cyber warfare, and I really do think there has to be a very strong response to such an attempt. This was a company in the U.S., but it's really an attack on American freedom. In the past, we in the U.S. and in the West have not responded effectively to attempts to shut down free expression. Think back 35 years ago, Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa to kill Salman Rushdie for a book he wrote. Well, not much was done about it. Imagine if Ayatollah Khomeini had had nuclear weapons. His successor, Ayatollah Khamenei, may have nuclear weapons, and that was a subject not at all discussed, and I think it's the most important national security threat we face today.
Let me get Bobby Gosha to this conversation. Another big issue that came up, Cuba. As you know, the president clearly pleased by what's going on in this improved U.S.-Cuban relationship, this atmosphere, although he played down this notion that he was about to fly off to Havana anytime soon.
Yeah, he seemed to suggest that it was much more likely he would go after he returned to being a private citizen than during his presidency, which is probably wise. I mean, it would be pretty bad optics for the president to go to Cuba or to have Raul Castro over to the White House. I mean, the rest of the world does business with Cuba, but Raul Castro is not welcome to the grand halls of the world. And major world leaders don't go to Havana because everyone recognizes he is, as the president said, he is a dictator. They are a repressive regime. It makes sense to get rid of an embargo that doesn't work. It makes sense. It was very interesting. The president started by invoking the Cuban people rather than the Cuban government, and I think that was the key point. It's not the regime, it's people-to-people relations. He's hoping that just by allowing that to happen, the U.S. will have greater leverage, greater say in Cuba's activities in the future. That's a little bit of a bank shot, but it's better than no shot.
Yeah, that's a good point. He says if he goes to Cuba, he'd like to meet with and engage with the Cuban people. Doug Brinkley, you're a presidential historian. How did he do in this end-of-year news conference?
Well, you know, who would have thought on the midterm election day that he would be able to sell effectively that this was a great year, 2014 in America, and it was a great year for him. It's all about the economy. You can almost feel how optimistic the president is. Gloria mentioned what a good mood he's in. I think he feels that the country is moving in the right direction. My other takeaway are on 2 points. One is, you know, Dwight Eisenhower with the Great Missile Gap crisis of 1957 ended up creating NASA. And I think this situation with North Korea, although Newt Gingrich calls it a war, it might be a battle now with a cyber battle with North Korea. He may need to create a cyber security agency or something. I think you would get bipartisan support. Not that people want to see more government on the right, but we've got to address this. So I think the North Korea thing is very important and significant, and we'll have to watch it. And secondly, look, I'm writing on FDR, and I'm writing about public works projects, the TVA and Grand Coulee Dam. This is a president that is not green-lighting Keystone. I don't know how other ways he could tell you, but you don't talk down your product and then say, okay, I'm going to do it.
Let's get a thought from Dana Bash, our chief congressional correspondent. Dana, I'm sure members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, watching very closely. How's what the president said today likely to play with them?
Well, first of all, he's somebody who a lot of members of Congress are looking at saying, who is this guy and where has he been for the last 6 years? He is somebody, as everybody has sort of mentioned in various ways, who's sort of clearly feels free to say what he wants, to do what he wants. On what Doug was just talking about, Keystone Pipeline, we should note that that is going to be the very first legislative battle in January, in just a couple of weeks. The new Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said he's going to do it right out of the gate. So if the president is going to use his veto pen, if he is leaning into doing that, it is probably going to be the first thing that we're going to see. The other thing I just think is worth noting, it may seem to our viewers to be a little bit of navel gazing from reporters, but not only did he only talk to print reporters, he only asked women for their questions. He only called on female reporters. That, I think, is very telling for a White House that has gotten a lot of flack, maybe as they should have, for the women inside the White House not rising to the top and not having a seat at the table. The fact that he ended this year only calling on female reporters was no accident.
Well, let me ask Jay Carney, though, a former White House press secretary, our CNN political commentator now, was that just coincidental? Was that deliberate? What do you think?
Oh, I think it was deliberate. I'm sure that it was discussed beforehand among, the president's advisors, including my successor, Josh Earnest, and Jen Palmieri, the communications director. I think it was an excellent decision to make. There are a lot of superb female reporters who cover the White House every day, and I think it was a fun way and a smart way to end the year by calling on only female reporters. And as a former print journalist, even though I'm on TV now, I always like to see the print journalists get their chance to ask the president questions. I would say, Dana, that there are plenty of very senior women in the
Yes.
White House. At one point when I was there, the National Security Advisor, the Homeland Security Advisor, and the White House Counsel, all extremely powerful positions.
There are now, absolutely.
Women, and that is certainly to the president's credit and Dennis McDonough's credit. I'll also say that the president was able to open this press conference by talking about how well the American economy is doing. And I think that the Band-Aid has been ripped off by Democrats and by the Democratic leader, the president, on the question of whether or not they can talk up the economy, because for so long now during this recovery, so many Americans haven't been feeling it. That's still the case, and we've seen that in the polls, but there is now data that show that middle-class Americans are beginning to see the benefits of this recovery and the steady growth and the steady job creation. Middle-class Americans are seeing their wages go up. This is a key development, because if that persists, it will, I think, change the perspective that a lot of Americans have about the decisions the president made, the decisions Congress made during the depths of the Great Recession, and his leadership and their leadership through the last several years, and it could play a big role in the 2016 election.
Getting back to the headline, the big headline out of this news conference, the headline being, of course, that the president thinks Sony Pictures made a mistake in pulling the release of the film, of the interview, because it was critical, made fun of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Jay Carney, how surprised were you by how blunt the president was on this sensitive subject and saying that the U.S. would retaliate, although he wasn't going to provide public details? I knew he felt that way. I was extremely glad to hear him say it so bluntly and clearly. I think that it's absolutely the right thing to say. The precedent, as Cliff was saying before, that the issues here go far beyond the decision to cancel screening of one movie. The implications of this move by the North Koreans are profound, and we need to react and take action. And I think that when he said the reaction would be proportional, I think the only signal he was sending is that he's not going to bomb North Korea, but he's going to respond probably in kind to what North Korea has done. But I think that's a good thing, and I think the message he sent about the importance of the First Amendment, the importance to continue to avoid self-censorship was profound and the right thing to say. What do you think, Cliff May? What would be the proportional, what would be the strong U.S. response that you would like to see come from the president?
Well, I think he's right to ask for a range of options from the Defense Intelligence Agency, from the National Security Council, and from others. And I think he has stated that this was a red line that's been crossed. I think it's vital that that red line not be crossed with impunity. I think it would be useful. You could use cyber weapons. We should have them to do some damage, but it should be right to the dictator in this case. I think you could also do other things. How about a showing of the movie in the White House? How about using Voice of America to show the movie around the world? How about showing that we will not be intimidated, that this film will be shown, that this cannot be done to us, but then do inflict some real pain on this regime? Yes, short of bombing the regime, but there is more that can be done with economic sanctions on this regime, as poor as it is. When the president says there will be a response, there has to be one. In the past, there hasn't always been one. When the Iranians plotted to bomb a restaurant here in Washington, D.C., a response was promised. I don't think we've seen one yet.
You know, Doug Brinkley, the president, is obviously the most powerful person in the world. When he says Sony Pictures made a mistake, they shouldn't have pulled the release of this film. Sony Pictures, that's a private company. They could change their mind. They could go ahead now and say, you know what, the president is right. We're going to release this film. Here's the question, Doug Brinkley. You think they should?
No. I don't. I think you have to get this crisis behind us, and I think you have to address it in the future. Meaning, I was disturbed. Why didn't Sony ever check in with the White House on what they should do? The president said they never called him. They never even, wanted his opinion on it. Meaning, we need a clearinghouse for these cyber problems. As a president earmarked, all sorts of companies in the future are going to have these kind of problems. We have to have a way to solve it better than just Sony acting unilaterally and then the U.S. government having to try to correct a private corporation.
Gloria Borger, the president, in these final 2 years, he opened up by saying we're going into the fourth quarter. He's talking about a football game.
I've heard.
Fourth quarter, and he says, interesting stuff happens in the fourth quarter. So he's got 2 years to go, and he's setting the stage that he wants to be active every single day. He says, I'm not going to stop for a minute in trying to make life better for the middle class of America.
And he was making the argument today that that is exactly what he's doing. As to why Sony might not have called him, maybe they didn't want to call him because they know what his answer would be. His answer would have been, I don't think you should do this in the interest of national security. You shouldn't cave in to this kind of hack attack. But that may be one reason they didn't do it. Look, I think this is a president who is energized, buoyed in many ways. It's been no secret to anybody in Washington that he was unhappy with the kind of lead bracelets he had to wear during the campaign, and he felt like he had to rein himself in. He was getting criticized from the left. He was getting criticized from the right. And I think now he kind of feels like he is able to be who he wants to be and do what he wants to do within the confines of his executive power. He doesn't have to worry about the next election, and he was frustrated in the past by his tactical responsibilities as a politician in chief for the Democratic Party. Now those tactical responsibilities, aside from setting the table for 2016, which he's doing, have sort of melted away. And I think we saw in his mood was a sense of, you know what, I'm finally getting to do the stuff that I want to do. And I bet he does veto the Keystone Pipeline, again, setting the table for energy issues in the next campaign.
Gloria, thanks very much. I want to thank the entire panel. Obviously, important stuff from the President of the United States. Once again, the headline, the President says, while sympathetic to Sony Pictures and their concerns, he says they made a mistake in pulling the release of the film. He says, I wish they had spoken to me first. The President of the United States also saying that there will be a U.S. response. The FBI has concluded North Korea is responsible. The President saying there's no indication other countries assisted North Korea. This was the work of North Korea. The President says the FBI investigation, he says, showed that there will be a response. The U.S. will respond at the time it decides to respond. It will be proportional, but the President refusing to spell out publicly what that response will be. Up next, George Clooney goes off on Sony Pictures as well. Hollywood and the news media. Why? Because he tried to get support from movie executives and no one played ball. You're going to hear his choice words for them and for Kim Jong-un. This is CNN's special live coverage.